The music was loud, laughter even louder, and the air thick with the scent of roses and expensive wine. I clutched the small box in my hands as I walked toward her table, my heart pounding harder than it should have. It wasn't much, just a necklace, simple but meaningful, chosen carefully because it carried the memory of a promise we once shared. I told myself she would understand, that she would see the love behind it. When I handed it to her, I could feel the curious eyes of guests, turning, waiting to see what I had brought. She unwrapped the paper slowly, almost theatrically, and for a brief second, her face was unreadable. Then she let out a laugh, a sharp, cutting sound that sliced through the chatter of the room. "A necklace, this?" she said, holding it up between her fingers like it was some cheap trinket she'd found in the gutter. "You really thought this was appropriate?" The guests chuckled nervously, some whispering behind their hands. I felt the heat crawl up my neck, my cheeks burning with humiliation. I tried to speak, to explain, but the words stuck in my throat. Beside her, the groom leaned in, his smirk deliberate, cruel. "Well, darling, not everyone can keep up with us, can they?" he said loud enough for the nearest tables to hear. The laughter grew. My stomach twisted. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the ground to open up and swallow me whole. Every sacrifice I had made for her, every hour I had spent working extra just to contribute to this wedding, flashed before my eyes, and here I was, reduced to a punchline. My hands trembled as I forced a smile, pretending it didn't cut as deep as it did. But inside, something broke. The girl I once loved like family, the one I believed would always see my heart, had just mocked me in front of everyone. I lowered my eyes, gripping the edge of the table to steady myself. The noise around me blurred into a cruel echo of whispers and laughter. I thought the night couldn't possibly get any worse. But what none of us knew was that the best man was holding a secret that could shatter their perfect night. From the moment she was born, I felt like she was mine, in a way the world couldn't quite explain. She wasn't my daughter, not by blood, but my sister's little girl, a child who came into this world when life had already beaten my sister down with hardship. Her father had left before she took her first breath, and my sister was drowning in bills, grief, and loneliness. I stepped in, not because I had to, but because my heart told me I couldn't let them struggle alone. I was young myself back then, barely scraping by. I worked long shifts at a factory and picked up extra cleaning jobs on weekends. Every penny I earned seemed to vanish as quickly as it came, but somehow, I always found a way to set something aside for her. New shoes for school when her old ones wore through, birthday cakes when my own table was bare. I didn't think of it as sacrifice. It felt natural, like the universe had handed me a responsibility I couldn't refuse. As she grew, so did the bond between us. She called me her second mom when she was little, a title that made my chest swell with pride. I was there for the scraped knees, the school recitals, the endless nights she cried because kids teased her about not having a father. I would hold her close and whisper, "You don't need anyone else. You have me." And for the longest time, she believed it. I watched her blossom into a young woman, smart and determined, with dreams bigger than our small world could contain. When she earned a scholarship, I worked double shifts to buy her luggage and a laptop. When she fell ill away at college, I drove through the night with homemade soup and blankets. I lived for those moments, because in her eyes, I saw a reflection of every sacrifice being worth it. Then she met him, the man who would become her groom. At first, I was happy for her. He was handsome, charming, full of promises. But over time, I noticed the changes. The way she started looking at me differently, as if I no longer belonged in the world she was building. The little digs, the dismissive laughs when I couldn't afford fancy dinners or lavish gifts. It wasn't her nature to be cruel. I knew his influence was reshaping her, molding her into someone I barely recognized. Still, I held on to hope. I told myself love makes people blind, and that once the shine wore off, she would remember who had been there all along. That's why I gave so much for her wedding. I helped plan, helped pay, and ignored the cracks in our relationship, telling myself that this was what family did. Even when she rarely thanked me, even when the groom's smugness made me feel small, I smiled and swallowed the pain. The necklace I gave her on that night wasn't expensive. It wasn't wrapped in velvet or diamonds, but it carried meaning engraved with the words we once used to sign letters to each other. Always us. I thought she would understand. I thought it would remind her that no matter what happened, I was still there, still the one who loved her unconditionally. Still, I never expected the very girl I'd loved like my own to laugh at me on the most important day of her life. It's strange how love can change a person, not just soften them, or bring out their better side, but twist them into someone unrecognizable. That's what happened to her after he came into the picture. Before him, she was still my girl, the one who would curl up beside me on the couch and tell me her secrets. The one who laughed at my corny jokes and still held my hand in public. Even as a grown woman, she used to call me every other day just to hear my voice. I was her anchor. But once he stepped in, slowly, piece by piece, I could feel her slipping away. At first it was little things. Missed phone calls, forgotten plans, texts that used to come at midnight, replaced by silence. I told myself it was normal. New love is all-consuming, I reminded myself. She deserved happiness, deserved to be cherished. But when I met him for the first time, I saw something in his eyes that unsettled me. He was polished, confident, the kind of man who shook your hand with just enough force to remind you of his strength. His smile was charming, but it didn't reach his eyes. And those eyes, they didn't look at me. They looked through me, like I was an obstacle, not family. Still, I wanted to believe he was good for her. I bit back my doubts and welcomed him, but the more time I spent around him, the clearer it became. He thrived on control. He dictated what she wore, where they went, even who she spent her time with. I noticed the way her laughter changes, less free, more calculated, as if she was always trying to please him, and then came the arrogance. She started making comments she never would have before. "Oh, you wouldn't understand, Auntie. It's a different world now." Or, not everyone can afford cheap things, and call it sentimental. Her words stung, but I told myself she didn't mean them, that he was whispering in her ear, teaching her to look down on me, on the life we had shared. It was him, I know it was. He paraded his wealth like a crown, always reminding everyone of what he could buy. He gave her designer dresses, diamond bracelets, vacations to places I'd only seen in magazines. And while she wore those gifts with pride, she began to treat mine the meals I cooked, the nights I stayed awake, comforting her as if they were nothing but crumbs from a poor woman's table. I saw the way he encouraged it, the smirk when she mocked me, the way he'd place his hand on her back like he was rewarding her for putting me in my place. He wanted her loyalty severed from me, and slowly, painfully, he succeeded. Family dinners that once felt warm and full, of laughter turned cold. I would sit quietly at the end of the table while he boasted about his latest business deal, and she would look at him like he hung the stars. If I tried to speak, he'd interrupt, finishing my sentences or belittling my perspective. "That's old-fashioned thinking," he'd say, or worse, "Maybe you just don't understand how success works." Each jab was another brick between me and the girl I'd raised like my own. I watched helplessly as she transformed, no longer the child who had once clung to me in tears, but a woman molded by his arrogance, taught to value wealth over love, glitter over loyalty. Still, I held my tongue. I told myself I wouldn't be the reason for her unhappiness. I'd rather swallow my pride 1,000 times than risk losing her completely. So, I endured the jokes, the dismissive glances, the quiet humiliation of being treated like an outsider, at a table I had built with my own hands. But deep down, I knew this wasn't love, it was possession. He didn't love her. He loved the way she looked on his arm, the way her adoration fed his ego. And she, blinded by the sparkle, couldn't see the chains being wrapped around her wrists. The worst part was the silence. My silence. I never called him out. I never told her the truth. I thought I was protecting her, thought love would open her eyes eventually. I believed that the girl I raised was still in there somewhere, waiting to remember who she really was. And yet, I stayed quiet. Until the wedding night, when my silence cost me everything.